Hi, I'm Dawn Cavanaugh, APQS Education Director. During these unprecedented times and with social distancing now the norm, quilters everywhere are finding that their quilting hobby has become more important than ever. Quilters across the globe are using their experiences and their fabric stashes to make all kinds of masks for people in need, from healthcare workers on the front lines to just family and friends who need protection to other vital businesses in the community. If you'd like to learn more about how to do that, APQS has actually set up a special page on our website. You can find a link called Stitches for Safety right on our homepage to learn more about how to make masks using a long arm, as well as the APQS computerized system. In fact, Angela Clark, our APQS Raleigh and Threadwaggle owner, has graciously created a free pattern that APQS owners who have the Quilt Path system can use to make multiple masks all at the same time using their APQS long arm. It's a fast, quick way to take a lot of time out of that process, and it's a way for you to figure out how to actually do only 2 layers of fabric with no batting in between. So quilters are pretty creative people, as you found out. That's one exciting different way to use your long arm. Now, of course, we're used to using batting in between the layers, but this is going to definitely speed up the process. With this project today, we're going to add another special something that you might make for someone you love. Perhaps it's your own family who needs a reminder. Perhaps you'd like to make something for the classroom when your kids actually get back into school. For me, it's actually a friend of mine, Gina, who runs a daycare and is still taking care of all those kids so their parents can go to work, some of whom work for the city and in special departments that are essential businesses. So I thought it would be great to make something that would be easy to do, that the kids could actually get involved with if you want, and would be fast and easy to do on the long arm. So you can actually use fusible web, trace around everybody's hands, maybe make some embellishments like a heart, and using fusible web, you're going to heat press those right onto your background fabric along with some lettering that says, of course, wash your hands. So I think I'm actually going to quilt all of Gina's kids' names onto the hands, but I'm also going to show you some really fun tricks and techniques to going around that raw edge applique. Now, if you're using fusible web, it's important to follow the directions that come with your particular project, or that fusible web product. I've learned that the hard way myself. The product that I use has specific directions to wash your fabric, and unfortunately, I chose to ignore that. So some of my fingertips here are actually peeling up off of the fabric. So follow those directions carefully. If you're not wanting to have to stitch around all of the applique pieces, instead you want to perhaps just quilt over the whole thing very quickly, then make sure that the product you use doesn't require sewing to keep it stable. And there are several adhesive products that are available like that. Heat and Bond Ultra is one product, Wonder Under is another, but there are several on the market. Just make sure that you follow the directions and check first. Well, I happen to have a few extra handprints and hearts. I'll refocus the camera so that you can see some fun ways to use the long arm to do things like a blanket stitch, a fake blanket stitch. Well, it's really a blanket stitch, but I should say that it's being done with a long arm. Maybe a zigzag stitch, some loops. If you think about all the kind of decorative stitches that maybe someone who's done a crazy quilt might do with hand embroidery, as long as you can think about it in terms of using the long arm in a straight stitch, you can do those too and have fun. Well, I had extra backing and batting below the quilt. I just have laid it up here. It's not actually basted down yet. But I had a few of these extra pieces from tracing around people's hands and hearts. So the black fabric is right now just laying on the top of the quilt. If you're wanting to speed things up a little bit, you can actually use an expanded base to act like a table for you, and an iron to heat these and set them right while the quilt is loaded on the frame. So let's get this, if you can get that under there, let's get this expanded base loaded right on the long arm. There we go. Make sure it's down nice and tight. And now we'll slip it over so that it can act like a base for me as I'm doing some pressing. And I've already peeled the backing off of this heart. You can see it's shining, so it's got the glue on one side. We want to make sure that that adhesive is facing down. I'll move it forward so that I've got a little bit of that base underneath this spot here, and reach over and grab my iron. I happen to have a cordless iron here to use, so I'll get that one out of the way. This product says to heat it for about 2 seconds and then to let it cool. Of course, you want to let it cool and then, of course, check the raw edges. If necessary, you might need to give it a shot again. We'll peel off this little hand here. Maybe. There we go. And remember, again, shiny side down. Ooh, maybe it's up here holding this heart. How about that? And I'm going to pull that machine forward a little bit so I can use the base for my pressing. Now remember, I'm not using steam. That's not what this product calls for, and I'm not putting a lot of time on there so that it's not going to damage the acrylic underneath. The batting is helping to protect that as well. Okay, so I'll give those others two a quick shot and secure them down, and then we will do some stitching. You notice that I've got several different colors layered on top of one another. For example, this purple hand is underneath the green and the orange. Well, if I'm going to stitch around the purple one, it means that I'm going to have several stops and starts, or I'm going to need to stitch my way around the green finger if I want to continue with purple. So that's another advantage to being able to actually build the quilt, so to speak, with that expanded base and ironing those hands down right as you go with the project, because you can lay the purple hand down, for example, and go all the way around it, then lay another color hand on top and stitch around that. Basically quilting and stitching as you go and as you construct the quilt. I'm using an APQS Freddy today, which has an optional quilt glide feature. That allows the manual sewing mode to kick in when I'm moving the machine slowly to make my detail work a lot easier. The quilt glide feature is an option available for Millie and Freddy quilting machines. To get a similar experience on Lucy and Lenny, turn off the stitch regulator. Then adjust the speed of the sewing motor in its constant speed or manual mode until the stitches are the length that you like and you have control over the motion. Well, with this first example, I'm going to do some tiny little circles to secure the edges of the fabric. I'm using red thread to make sure that hopefully the camera can pick it up. Here, grab my bobbin thread, and I'll use the needle up and down feature to take some tiny locking stitches. I started actually in the joint of a finger so that if I'm a little wobbly here when we get started, it won't be quite so noticeable. I'm going to try and keep my hands out of the way of the camera, and here we go. There, that quilt glide feature is kicking in. Now, as you can see, because I didn't use the fusible glue that actually doesn't require sewing, I've got some raw edges peeking up around the fingers, but yeah, that just adds to some of the charm, I think. I think it might actually be easier if I switch to the optional open toe foot as well to give me better visibility. So you can see those little circles filling in and raw edge appliquing that whole section down. And keep in mind that I'm using a contrasting thread, and if you are a little nervous about not being perfect, I'm certainly not myself, then use a matching or blending thread or even invisible thread if you're that concerned about it, and you'll be a little bit of a camouflage artist. It won't show. Well, I've switched to the low profile open toe. That's an optional accessory. For that foot, I'm just going to have to be careful that I don't catch it on a piece that I might not have gotten fused completely down. And again, remember that if I had used a different type of fusible webbing, it wouldn't have left quite so many of these little fuzzy pieces, these little stray threads, because it would secure those with adhesive. But, que sera, sera. This is just for practice and to give you some ideas. And it's a little tougher to quilt when the camera's between my arms here. So hopefully you'll be able to see. This next stitch is a simulated blanket stitch. A blanket stitch comes along the outer edge of the piece and then jumps in with a straight stitch. You try to make those straight stitches that jump in at a right angle to the edge, and you try to make them jump in a consistent amount. Of course, it may not show up quite so good on this green fabric, but if you are concerned about marking it or getting in, the same distance, you can always go along and just lightly give yourself a target to shoot for all the way around using a marking tool that's your favorite. Well, let's get started and see how we do. And remember, practice is going to make it a little bit better for you here. So we're going to come along and go in, out, down. So there's the quilt glide coming on, in, out. The beauty of doing this blanket stitch or simulated blanket stitch on the long arm is that you're also quilting it at the same time. But we're just going to try a real basic zigzag stitch. You decide how much of the zig or the zag you want on and off of the fabric. I'm going to try and just barely get on and off, see what that looks like here. Move the handles out of the way so you can see. So I need a little more practice, most definitely. You can also change that into a serpentine shape. I'm just making a slight curve instead of a zig and a zag. We'll zoom in and take a quick look at that serpentine one. Hey, that up too far. There we go. That looks pretty cool. Here are some other examples of possibilities that you can use to stitch down the raw edge applique. Now keep in mind that this does mean that your edges will still fray with that fabric. So if you're not a person who's a fan of having that rough raw edge, then these designs, this technique may not be best for you. But if you're okay with a little rough edges, then you can get a quilt done very quickly. Well, I switched to a matching red thread so that you can see that when the thread matches, we all look a whole lot better, and it really hides all of our mistakes. So let's do that again. This time I'm going to do the blanket stitch. Well, as you could see when I was demonstrating some of those raw edge applique designs, they are literally a little rough around the edges. It'll be a lot easier if you spend a few minutes actually practicing the designs so that you can get into a good rhythm. Remember, if you have the Quilt Glide feature on your machine, try it with that and try it without. On Lucy and Lenny, which don't have that option, put the machine into manual sewing mode, turn off the stitch regulator, and adjust the constant speed until it feels comfortable to you, and you'll get a very similar effect. Well, I'm going to switch back to my matching thread colors. I'm going to baste my quilt top down and tackle all of these, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's all done. After I completed all of the raw edge applique, I actually turned the quilt 90 degrees and remounted it. I tend to do better when I'm writing names and things like that, seeing them upright. So you can tell that I used my best script writing, at least with the quilting machine, and added all the kids' names to the hands. Well, I still have to finish the binding, but I hope that you've had fun following along with this fast and easy project. As you can see, raw edge applique is quick and easy to do on an APQS long arm. To find the pattern for our wash your hands wall hanging to make one for yourself or someone you love, visit our website at apqs.com. Click on the blog section and look for our section called Free Patterns. You'll find this pattern along with dozens of others, all free courtesy of APQS. We also invite you to check out our Stitches for Safety section. Learn more about how you can help to make sure that all of us are safe through this COVID pandemic. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. Check out our YouTube channel for more helpful videos and tips and lots of inspiration. We're here for you at APQS.